I'm your host, and today my guest is James Tatham. Our key topic for today's chat will be how Nepal and Buddhism shaped James' coaching philosophy. So for those tuning in, whether it be high performance staff, strength and conditioning coaches, or athletes yourself, feel free to send in some questions, and no doubt we'll be able to find some time for James to answer those a bit later on in the show. But welcome, James, JT. I'll go with the nickname that you put in the bottom corner there. It's been, like we'll talk about off here, a couple of years before when we last caught up in a similar format, Zoom, back in the COVID days, Ask a Level 3. So good to have another catch up, mate, and looking forward to the next 45, 60 minutes chat and shop.
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Jack. I was appreciative that you asked me. And yeah, these digital formats are our thing. We'll be definitely a little bit less structured than the ASCA Level 3, though,
I think so. Yeah, absolutely. Well, for those that aren't aware of your background, mate, do you mind providing, I guess, context in terms of how you got into the industry of elite sport, but also some different experiences you've done along the way?
Yeah, can do, mate. I think anyone that's probably working in sport is not too dissimilar. As a young kid, I was just crazy about sport. I grew up in a small rural community in the southeast corner of New South Wales, a little town called Bombala. And my old man was a sport enthusiast, would touch football and golf and squash. And so I ended up leaving high school, representing the region for golf and squash and rugby league. So played a lot of sports, and around that early 20s, I went to uni and actually was studying sports journalism because I thought at the time I was an opinionated young lad and just thought I could write what we need to see on the back of the paper. But after a year of journalism studies and seeing where that industry was going into away from print was where I wanted to be. So I stayed with the sport studies and changed exercise science. And then I probably met my first mentor at that point, Dr. Stephen Bird. He was running the Western Region Academy of Sport intern program, and I was fortunate enough to land a coaching position there. And I worked with junior athletes in lawn bowls, golf, vaulting, and basketball for the Central West region, so from Dubbo through to Western Sydney, north, like the Blue Mountains, and all the way down to like the Cowra region. Mm-hmm. And I really fell in love with like that contribution you can make to a junior athlete, because it probably struck me in the fields in that, like, as a rural kid, there was no coaching to get to high performance, and that's where my influence and love for the profession came along. Post uni, I moved into I kind of went down to the Waratahs in at Moore Park, and got my foot in the door there because I agreed to doing an honours, looking at the influence of self-myofascial release combined with a dynamic warm-up on jump performance, kind of validating their readiness to train systems. Means to an end, I didn't enjoy the research process. There was a lot of just doing applied research. The research question started out here and ended up really down here, and couldn't be impactful on the training and the daily training environment. So, but we got the job done. We validated it. But along the way, I probably met my next influences with Tom Tomlinson. He was the strength coach there at the time, and he's now working at the English Football Union or rugby, English rugby. And then, Sydney, I played around in general pop as well. I was coaching out of CrossFit Sydney. I worked at 2 private schools in the GPS, so Riverview and St. Aloysius College, with their rugby teams, and also a couple of years with Northern Suburbs in the Shute Shield. And had a good relationship there with Simon Cron. Now he's over at Western Force. So that's how I got into the industry. Once I did a 3-year or 4-year stint in Sydney. For whatever reason, I just decided I wanted to be a bit closer to that where I came from. So I moved back to Canberra, and that's where I met Julian Jones and got a little opportunity to work at the AIS in a casual contract. And from there, created relationships with Volleyball Australia and Tennis Australia and picked up some contracts, and 4 years running some junior development programs with them. 2020, I was offered a job in at the AIS full time, and that's where I am now with Basketball Australia's Centre of Excellence program and also the Men's Artistic Gymnastics National Training Centre. So, been doing that now, and holy hell, that's just the sports side of things I've done.
Yeah, fantastic, mate. Great coaching journey, and hopefully pretty inspiring for those listening in that might be studying their degree, and all the different experiences, environments you can sort of find yourself in our industry, from private sector to schools to working at the top level. I guess over your career, mate, so far, what would be some highlights that sort of spring front of mind that you're most proud of?
Yeah, I'll keep it to the sports sector at this stage. So I think one of the ones that is uncanny right now that is the full circle. So I mentioned my first S&C job working in golf and bowls out at the Central West with the Western Region Academy of Sport. So in 2012, I was doing that. And in this industry, the cream usually rise to the top. So around 2 years to maybe 18 months ago, the coaches at the development age back then are now the heads of sport. And I've kept those relationships all these years, and I've been able to help Bowls Australia leverage the resources through the National Institute network and set up their high performance programs with a bit more focus on physical development, leadership, in addition to their technical tactical. It's been really a rich experience, and they acknowledged the AIS and their contribution through the camps process to help them on their success in Birmingham at the Com Games as a result. And they got 3 gold, 3 silver, their best Northern Hemisphere performance. So to just have something from 11 years ago, you don't know where it's going to go, to maybe, just a drop in the ocean contribution to helping a sport do better and inspire the people like it does. It's really cool. Another one that I love is the Waratahs. My first gig out of uni. I was there for 18 months, maybe 2 years, and we won the comp. Like the Waratahs won the comp in 2014, and we had Michael Checker at the head, and Hayden Masters head of performance, and Tom Tomlinson and a bunch of other interns that I'd love to mention, but I won't. We got to experience a club with a vision and clarity. The aim was to go top 2 in 2 years, and we won it in that second year. It was an experience that just showed what's possible when you have a clear vision and everyone bought in.
Yeah, I love that.
There's 2. I probably don't want to take up 2, but there's more. There's more I'd love to mention. You just ask if you want to know more. I've lost the audio. Just can you hear me? I can't hear you.
How's that? Is that better?
That's better. Yeah, I got you back.
Yep. Sorry about that. We'll edit that section out. But yeah, going into the flip side, mate. Obviously, with elite sport comes pressure. What have been some challenging moments in your career that you've faced, and what did you sort of learn, or how did you grow as a coach from those experiences?
Oh, mate. I think a real pressure situation that there's that time in Sydney, like after leaving uni, my first 2 weeks after uni, I actually went to Samoa for 2 weeks and worked with the Apia Sevens and the high performance rugby team out there for 2 weeks. Bit of an experience, but that delayed my start at the Waratahs, and so I didn't have a lot of time to set up where I was living. And I rang a mate. We ended up staying in Emu Plains in a caravan and commuting from Western Sydney to the central and walking to Moore Park to do this internship for free. And we were then kind of doing our honours, and it was just this big grind for months. And after that, we decided to move in. We got kicked out of the caravan. We moved into one of my mates' lounge rooms for 2 weeks. Then we shared a room together in Newtown. Like, we was paying like $240 a week for a room, so we could afford. And then we were a bit closer, so we were able to get our job at CrossFit Sydney at 5:30 in the morning, run a couple of classes, then get over to the TARS, then get over to the school and do the basketball coaching. And within about 18 months, maybe 2 years, we'd finally, use this coaching kind of platform we built for ourselves to make enough money to actually get a house and separate into our own rooms. And what that taught me was just like the resilience I have, or that's possible if you just keep committing, you'll find solutions. Mm-hmm. But what it also showed me was like I had this idea in my head that you have to get anywhere, you start from the bottom and work your way up, and that's totally what happened. And I think now, as I sit there, I actually question, was that belief that I had actually relevant, or could I have questioned that and done things differently? Because I, as a young man, didn't ask for help, didn't look sideways, and just had my plan and no one would help me otherwise. And it just created, something that possibly could have been done quicker or more velocity with less struggle. But, at the time it was hard, but now I look back on it, it's one of the best, most formative things I did in this industry was look at, it put me at the Waratahs, it put me at Northern Suburbs, it put me at Riverview, it put me at Aloes. I even coached Year 8 basketball, J-League. Do they go that low? But by doing what I could, it gave me the exposure and probably the credibility to be like, oh, I'm here.
Yeah. And I guess, like you mentioned before, that, just sort of the importance of thinking laterally in those moments, which can be challenging when you're so busy, you've got many hats, and you're pretty much in that survival mode. But I guess if you were talking to a coach or someone that's listening and that's in that similar sort of phase in their coaching career where perhaps everyone sort of needs to cut their teeth, but how could you make it a little bit easier, do you think, now that you've sort of gone through that?
Yeah, upon reflection, that's a good question. And upon reflection, I don't know if a young or an early career practitioner or coach coming through is fearful of asking questions and things like that, or doesn't want to, it takes courage to be vulnerable. And I think a young coach coming through can be quite transparent about where they're at and look at making requests to kind of do things a little differently. I think if I could go back, that's what I would have done.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Yeah, no, great advice. Speak up. Yeah, love that. And
that's one challenge. I mean, I've got more. I've got a few here.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, I think once I established myself, remember I moved to Canberra and started to create contracts for myself with sports. Those contracts, especially with Volleyball Australia, it started quite small, like 10-hour a week kind of things. And they had, 30, 40 athletes on the books. And so, it was very clear to me that this resourcing is insufficient for the outcomes they're trying to get. They didn't match up. So across 4 years, I was able to take that from 10 hours a week to a $95,000 budget, and able to enabled me to look at it, S&C from a business sense. I was working as a trainer assessor for my retainer, a 0.6 contract at CIT, and looked at this pool of money that I'd built to then subcontract other coaches. So got the coach athlete ratios as in a sense from 1 to 40 to 1 to 12, because that coach athlete ratio is, I believe, one of the most important things to drive rapid outcomes or more rapid outcomes. That was a big challenge, because I actually had to talk to stakeholders that I'm not used to talking to. I'm used to talking to head coaches and athletes, not at the time HPDs, CEOs, and those kind of roles.
Yeah, interesting. How did you sort of explore those challenges? Was there any mentors that you could reach out to, or was it sort of learn as you go?
Yeah, good question. I actually was probably lucky enough at the time in my CIT role. I was coaching. I was training and assessing students in sport development, Cert 3 and diploma, Cert 4 and diploma, and a unit in that was project management. And so the fastest way to learn is to teach. So I jumped off the cliff, learnt to fly on the way down with teaching project management. But once I learnt outcomes, deliverables, Gantt charting, what's in scope and out of scope, I was starting to craft a project or a strategy document for S&C, and I was able to start using the language of what's in scope and out of scope for S&C, what's in scope, what's a deliverable that I'm committing to that you're paying for, and what's not. And to bring that clarity, it was like they signed it and I delivered it. And then that enabled me to go, they've paid me to deliver outcomes. Do I have to do it all myself? Well, no, I'm going to look at subcontracting and be creative with where I can get this dollar, and start to look at coach development and create that opportunity for myself to develop coaches as well as business sense, and as well as, developing athletes.
Mm-hmm. And what were some of the perks when the coach to athlete ratio moved from sort of 30 to 12?
Well, firstly, it mobilized me out of the weeds. In this industry, I'll call the weeds just coaching everyone and running around like a headless chook with 40 athletes, or doing 3 sessions back to back, because at the AAS we have a high performance policy that you've got to have 1 to 12 ratios. So with 36 athletes, I was running 3 sessions back to back, 3 hours. With 3 coaches, I could then go, we've got 1 session, 3 coaches, and mobilize the athletes and the coaches to run the program a little more lean, a little less time heavy.
Oh, awesome. Yeah, that's great. It's a good process and system to be able to think that way and put those processes in place, and like ultimately help physical development, but just in a different way, thinking differently as well, which is hopefully empowering for the listeners to sort of think outside your lane sometimes, or not necessarily outside your lane, but that you can influence your environment and shake things up. You don't have to necessarily do things the same way all the time.
Oh, mate, I think learning project management speak, and then and systems of project management. Anyone moving through an S&C career, especially in high performance sport, you're more than likely going to go, if you want to leave coaching, into management, where dollars are scarce and outcomes are overflowing, and so human resourcing and that kind of thing. If you can develop that skill set early, it's going to enable you later down the track.
And moving over to our key topic, I guess to intro, we're talking about how you've been to Nepal 3 times. What was the initial, before the first time, what was the initial attraction to go into Nepal, mate?
That's good segue. I have to mention the influence of my dad and his sport. He also influenced me into adventure, and we like we've been to Central Australia and walked everything there. We've been everywhere in Australia and seen the countryside. But in 2015, we're like, we've got to go see the Himalayas. And so in April, we went over there and we went to Annapurna Base Camp, and we did a little bit of touring of Kathmandu, me, my old man, and his good mate Ross. And for me, it was in 2015, so it was right at the end of my time in Sydney, like my 3 years there. So I'd done all that struggling, and I was a pretty salty human at the time, so going to Nepal and just I felt really small, like looking at the Himalayas, but I also felt really connected to the people there. They were so generous, but they were so like happy, but they have absolutely nothing. So I had this kind of recalibrating experience for my first visit to Nepal, and I came back on the 22nd of April. And the irony is, like 3 days later, I got a call from Dad, who I was in King's Cross. He worked for the Geoscience Australia in earthquake monitoring and tsunami warning for Australia. And Nepal's got a massive earthquake happening right now. And it was like, I don't know, it struck me in the pulled on the heartstrings very, very significantly, and I was like, I really feel bad for escaping this chaos and not being able to help. And like 3 or 4 days, like mulling over what I was going to do. I remember I was in the gym at Riverview at the time, looking out the window. Coach Stephen Smith was there. I'm like, I've got to help these people. I just had this great time, and ended up making this ridiculous pledge to raise 85 grand and trek 850 kilometres to contribute to the families of the 8,500 that passed away. And I went back to uni. I was still doing my honours at the time. I went back to uni. One of my mates in media, Jack Thompson from Parks, he's like, do it, man. I'll back you. Anyways, in 2 nights, we built a website, created a Stripe account, and launched this mission. And like in 24 hours, I had 1,000 followers and $8,500 in the bank. Like, it's underway. And from there, it was no stopping. Like, in the next 12 months, through different fundraising initiatives and taking people walking in the Blue Mountains and inspiring people to get into trekking, I've raised 30 grand.
That's fantastic.
And like, I gave 17,000 to Oxfam to get the tents up and the water to the places affected. And then the next 13,000, I actually started a partnership with the Reach for Nepal Foundation, and they started letting me do what I want with the money. So I rebuilt some amenities in a remote school, and then funded English teachers in that school for the next 12 months to enable the government funding to go to other things that school wanted. And so we went back to Nepal in 2017. My dad and another strength coach, Seaton, we went to Everest Base Camp, we summited Island Peak, and then we went to that school and built the toilets.
Oh, how good.
So we raised the money and put the bricks. And then in 2018, I went back by myself. I did the 3 passes trek. I did 30 days in the Himalayas, and then went back to the school and saw the impact of, like, a year later, the amenities were redone. They've had their English teacher and handed over some volleyball equipment, because volleyball's a massive sport in Nepal. And just able to really look at contributing to less fortunate communities.
Yeah. Oh, that's awesome, mate. What a great story. I wasn't expecting that. That's fantastic. It just goes to show, going with your gut when you've got a strong feeling to do something, what impact you can make with it. Motivation disappeared. I didn't need it. Like, once I'd made that public declaration, and I mean, I was scared out of my brains. Like, I actually worked and people started contributing money. Like, I actually got after it, and the benefits outweighed what I did.
personally, I didn't think I would get anything from it, but I learned how to have conversations that influence people to contribute to something they didn't know. I created a vision and a mission and a little, not for profit that, we got T-shirts and merch out. Like, it was just all inside, like helping a community on the other side of the world that are less fortunate than me. And it really kicked in the unconditional like kindness in me, right? And then Nepal's, the home to Tibetan Buddhists and the Mahayana tradition of Buddhism, and so I got into that while I was over there.
That was on the third visit or the second?
So the third visit I did 3 days of Buddhist studies with a monk, and then went down to the birthplace of the Buddha in Lumbini and meditated for 12 days straight. And in the Vipassana tradition, and or in the Vipassana method. And I was interested. Well, I guess I was interested for multiple reasons. One, Buddhists are happy with nothing. What's that about? Two, our mind is the common denominator in everything we do in performance. So if I can master that, like I seem to have worked on mastery of the body, what's possible? And I've always been one to try first before I tell others to do it. So the practice of meditation sort of started in 2013 in my times in Sydney using the Headspace app. In 2017, I did my first 10-day Vipassana retreat in the Blue Mountains, and then in 2018, I'm doing a 12-day retreat in a way more intense environment in the birthplace of the Buddha, and taking the wisdoms of an ancient technique that helps you see, I guess, the source or the root cause of maybe, human suffering and misery.
And talk us through the 12 days. Like, is it how does it start? What time of day? What does a typical day look like? Is it routine? Yeah.
The gong goes off at 5 a.m., maybe 4:30, and you're encouraged to shower mindfully and get to a 5 a.m. sitting, and you just meditate. This is the one in Lumbini until breakfast. And then you've got walking meditation to get to breakfast. Then you've got eating meditation, and you're honouring noble silence. You're not looking at anyone. You're just there to live like a monk and be like a monk. And you're basically mindful from the time you're awake to the time you're asleep at 10:30 at night. And like any kind of let's think of meditation as a training modality. Mm-hmm. If you do it 20 minutes in the morning, 20 minutes in the afternoon, you'll get some effect. If you immerse yourself in it like I did for 12 days, you're going to get a rapid understanding or discovery of what mindfulness is.
And does it get easier as the days go on? Or
100%. Probably better to reflect on my first 10-day retreat on the process. So there's a technique done for the first 4 days of this guided meditation where you are literally just sharpening your ability to focus on a primary object. And this one was your breath in your nostrils and out. So you sit and observe the cold air going in your nostrils and the warm air coming out, and that little space, and you literally just focus on it. That's your job. And when you notice you're not doing your job, come back and do your job. And day 1, 2, and 3, your monkey mind's doing anything else, like what I'm missing out on, what I would like to do tonight, that kind of. But then by day 4, you're really sharp. If you're really diligent and really disciplined, like, I was there. I wanted to master it in 10 days because I didn't want to do this again. I just want to take the juice and run with it.
Yeah.
And so I was really diligent. And by day 4, had this really like sharp ability to concentrate and hold focus for minutes. And then they start introducing the Vipassana technique, which is to observe reality as it is. So the Vipassana technique is to look at sensations in the body as they arise and pass away, because a Buddhist principle is impermanence, and they believe everything's impermanence. And so these sensations arise, pass away, some painful, some pleasant. And you can observe yourself cling to pleasant things, and you can observe yourself avert the painful things. And that at the fundamental nature is greed, which is a human suffering. Okay, you cling to pleasantries and you avoid pain. So anger and delusion. And if we don't know this, if you don't understand that this root cause of human suffering, or don't see it for yourself, you are just guessing, really. And that's what, through the Vipassana technique, from day 5 through to day 10, you're just literally observing and letting things arise and pass away. And then for me, what it made available was like how I'd allowed pleasant things. That, path of least resistance is that you follow your pleasant, and realize, like, I've avoided things, conversations, people, because they didn't bring me. They were my childhood, my early adolescence. I'm avoiding things I didn't like, and so what that makes available moving forward is the hard conversations. Yeah, I recognize I'm having a internal, reaction to something that I've never done, or something I've never heard, or I'm challenging myself to see that I've got some level of like inferiority complex. Like, those people are not my people. I'm not going there. It's like, actually, to be a professional, I've got to go there. I've got to have a conversation with that person. And that's what mindfulness brought for me practically. Learning.
Awareness, yeah.
I've got a real awareness for, yep, I'm not at my emotional home base. This is pleasant. I'm going to say yes to that. No worries. I actually question it. Why am I taking the easy option? What am I avoiding?
Yeah, so you can be more deliberate in your approach. And going back to sort of, I guess, referring it back to training, which probably for most of the listeners would is a good sort of analogy, I guess, so to speak. But is it something now that you've had those training camps, let's call them, the 10-day and 12-day, taking the juice, do you need to keep topping up your stores, I guess, so to speak, after that? Like, is it like maybe one of those a year, do you think, is optimal, and then you have a daily practice, or what do you think sort of...
It's a great analogy, mate. And I've started to, like, it's been, what's 2018, 2019, like November 2018 was my last one. And a lot of just personal discoveries in those things that are long lasting, I believe. And then there's a Buddhist kind of belief that everything's impermanent, and they attach that to the cycle of the breath. So your breath arises, and when you exhale, it passes. And there's also a belief that humans, there is no I, we're just mind and matter, and we're forever changing. And so it's absurd to attach a name to yourself, which is forever changing. So by moment to moment, you're a new version of yourself. So that loathing of the past disappears if you can adopt that belief, I believe. And so those kind of things allowed me, since 2018, I have this skill to go, breathe in, breathe out, reset. I'm back at my emotional home base. And I'm moving on. I'm a new version of me, and I'm cracking on. However, that said, I recognise that these training camps, these 10-day intensives, can really just resharpen up your focus, give you an opportunity to go really quiet and kind of recalibrate yourself. And I'm actually thinking, like, in the next year that, poor Julie, I'm going to have to take a 10-day holiday where I can't even text you. It's going to take some selling. I've got a fiance now, so a bit more responsibility than just going off as a single bloke and doing what I want. But I'm interested in doing that again. And
it sounded like there was a process of almost development might have been the 10-day course where, there was one method, and then it progressed to a different method. So is it each day there's a theme to the days?
Good question. So that first. the first one I did, the Vipassana in the Blue Mountains, that had a curriculum. That was like first 4 days is the mind sharpening. The next 7 is Vipassana. And the last day is metta, where you're creating good things and putting out intentions in the world and wishing good things of other people, which is that loving kindness sort of piece of the Buddhists. The one in Nepal, it was more of an extension of Theravada Buddhism, and it was you had a chat with a teacher in the afternoon on your practice, and there was no curriculum. You just sit there and you observe the rise and fall of your abdomen. That's your job.
Wow.
And then you deal with what comes out. I found in the library a book, a scripture written, from 1,000 years ago that actually kind of told the expected experience as you walk the path to enlightenment through this tradition of mindfulness. And I was able to go, wow, I experienced that like day 2, and it's written in the book in chapter 3. And so of an evening, I was just reading a chapter of a book as I noticed as I'm going through this retreat, the changes and the ability to focus and what I'm kind of identifying as present moment reality, rather than when you're thinking about it, you're in your head and that's not reality.
And as a coach working in the world of performance, like you mentioned, that emotional home base and being able to reset, be a pretty handy tool to be your best, not only for yourself but also for your athletes. Have you found that this has made an impact on I guess, your performance as a coach?
Yeah, it's a great question. So that through the meditation in the first retreat I did, the teacher would talk about observe things as they arise and know their nature and let them go with an equanimous mind. Like equanimity was the thing. You don't judge it, you just accept it and you move on. And so that equanimity or peacefulness or stillness, observing, things you see as a coach or things scoreboard pressure, right? What's our, scoreboard? We see a scoreboard, that's a stimulus. And then we have a response to that. What meaning are we adding to the scoreboard? Through mindfulness, you can go, scoreboard, yeah, that's information. I'm going to remain equanimous and make a decision from a non-emotional, without emotional kind of build-up. And I think as an S&C coach, I think before mindfulness, see bad reps, react, invalidate the athlete. Now it's see bad reps. Let's have a conversation about that and I'm not going to invalidate you because I'm not reacting now. I'm actually, let's have a discussion. What are you dealing with this exercise, and then look at skill acquisition. Where do we need to go? Do we need to dial back? Do we need to feel this exercise another way? As I move up in my career, I'm sitting at bigger and bigger tables with different people, and I'm able to listen to the hard conversation without getting emotionally charged.
Yeah, that was going to be my next part, I guess. Your interaction. So, from a mindfulness point of view and building that self-awareness, how's that impacted working with not only athletes but also other staff members from an interactions and communications point of view?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love them to be on this and say what it's like being with me, but for me, my experience of dialogue, problems, conversations that we all deal with in sport, whether it's funding, governance, underperformance, overperformance, recruiting, those things that I used to walk on eggshells around, actually I can be with all that and actually let's sit and listen for what the problem is. It's usually not what's being said, and we can get to the root cause of the problem, and let's discuss that collaboratively, and it's not a me versus you problem. It's us versus the problem. And I would I make an assumption that people think I'm pretty pleasant to be around most of the time. I'm good and a very decent communicator, because I'm not riling up too much. I keep things pretty jovial, and that's probably a reason for mindfulness. And two, I've spent so much time in Nepal, and I now have a belief that it's a privilege that the biggest problems I have are sport-related problems, which is an industry we've created for entertainment purposes.
Yeah, no, well said. And for the athletes listening in, and coaches actually, you mentioned Headspace, starting with that, and then you've been on this journey ever since then, and it's got to the point of a 12-day mindfulness experience, which is listening to that sounds significantly challenging. Where would you recommend people start? And what's an effective way just to start building for maybe you want to improve your focus? From a performance point of view.
Yeah, I think it's good to recognize. I think when people hear mindfulness, they immediately think meditation, and then their idea of meditation detracts them. They're like, I don't want to sit down and do nothing. Like, I think it's good to recognize what mindfulness is, and mindfulness is an interruption to mind wandering, and we're very, very well trained at mind wandering this day and age. I think there's a statistic I got this from Yale, the Science of Wellbeing, that 49.6% of our day is spent mind wandering, and mind wandering makes us feel lousy. So, mindfulness is an interruption to mind wandering. You have a stimulus or an object of focused intention, right? That can be music, that can be sport. I think it's a reason why a lot of people play sport. It gets rid of their mind wandering. They're in flow state, and they're doing things they love. So my check and challenge is, what is our belief of mindfulness? It's not just sitting meditation. And how people get into it, right, is what's probably questioning, why would I even want to get into it? Mm-hmm. Start there, because I'm not one to preach things and say, do this. Like, mindfulness is there for everyone. People know what it is, and you can contemplate that. But at some point, there'll be I want something to make a lasting difference. And that's where I would suggest, if you're at that point, pick up the Headspace app and try the free 10-day course. They're 10-minute sittings, and you're starting to get training. Nice pommy voice as well. They got Andy on those apps.
I've met Andy before.
You're getting trained in starting that journey of thoughts can be observed, and behind them, I think the analogy is a stormy day. There's clouds, they're your thoughts, but behind that is serenity and a clear blue sky. And if it's something that works for you, then you can, once you dip the toe in the water, it's like anything. You can go down the rabbit hole like I did.
And for those starting out, I guess more from an athlete's perspective around game day, we've been sort of connecting it to training, and like any training can have some negative effects in terms of fatigue, let's say. Would you say there's an element of cognitive fatigue when starting out with mindfulness for someone that maybe their mind wanders 70% of the day and now they're doing, 20% less of mind wandering? Is there some negative effects to that happening on game day potentially and leading into a session if you've used your tickets too early in the day, or is it more?
I think those moments you take give you back some energy. Even if it's like on game day, if you start to notice, I still play pretty high level golf now, and I play squash, and I recognise on game day that I have an expectation to play. But through some grounding kind of mindfulness, be aware that my feet are on the ground, I can hear the birds, and I'm feeling that here I am. The rest is a mental formation that I'm getting excited about. That's not now. So if you can have a moment of stillness, call it a minute, call it 3, maybe 10, just reset, recalibrate. It can give you energy to something you're moving into.
Yeah, I love that. And what about mindfulness coaching? So when you're presenting with players, or perhaps you're selling a new training block, how's it helped with things like clarity and communication to players?
Coaches are performers too. Let's start there. And we're not shooting the hoops anymore or doing the flips. We're starting to create conversations and selling compelling futures for athletes to step into and undertake for greater performances. So if you can center yourself, deliver a clear and concise message, we know that athletes' attention spans is one of the finite resources we've got to deal with. You can put yourself in the best place for your performance.
Mm-hmm.
Because it's always scary to put yourself at risk, and that's what we do. When we have an idea, we've got some buy-in, we want to steer the ship in a different direction. Embarking on that first voyage is quite stressful, and so if we can acknowledge that through some mindfulness, bring ourselves back to center, and actually focus on what the outcome is, and when it's an outcome for someone else, it's a pretty comfortable conversation at the end of the day. If we're focusing on the risk of ourselves, that's selfish, and no wonder you'd probably not getting anywhere.
Yeah. And for the athletes that have started on this journey, what are some of the common benefits that you hear about from their athletic pursuits?
Yeah, I've got some evidence of young guys that I've worked with here in the basketball program. I've got some great psychs that have done some introductory work to mental skills. They do that for me. That's not my lane. Through the introduction and practices, we've seen guys probably that uncoupling of like stress and performance, like 2 or 3 minutes into a basketball scrimmage, scoreboard pressure's building and I'm panicking, I've got to make a difference, like stopping those kind of mind wandering or rabbit holes that our minds go into. So give them strategies to grounding, come back to the present, reset, and give them the tools to kind of when they're on the bench or when between sets and reps, recalibrate. Let's reflect on that performance and start again. Like those kind of I call them grounding and kind of acceptance that set's over and we move on to the next one. It's not a common thing is I see is if the first 2 or 3 things in a session don't go well, then it's a bad session. We're starting to forecast that. That's the whole session's done because I didn't start well. Who says so? That's future. That's not now. If we can put in a strategy to reset and be optimistic and open that, flow state's coming, we just got to be willing to accept it. Let's not write off the whole session just because your signals or your first 3 or 4 reps are telling you it's going to be a bad session or a bad day. Like that's the self-fulfilling prophecy. I want to stop that. I want to be open to. We're going to discover something in the next 45 minutes. We're going to have a really good training unit, maybe the session. But if we discover something, that's a great session. Let's not like that before we start.
Yeah, I love that mindset. I think it can apply to anything. And, too often we can be quite black and white and quite absolute when really there's, who knows what's around the corner and what's to come if you keep that open mind and stay present.
Yeah.
Feel like we've covered a fair bit in detail, not only your journey with it all, but also from a coach's perspective, the benefits of mindfulness and I guess leaning on Buddhism as a philosophy and how it can transfer into just life in general, but also in the world of performance. Is there anything, JT, you want to touch on before we start to wrap up the show, mate? Move on to a couple of personal questions.
No, I think we covered most of it, mate. I think this is an area. The first thing I was like, I'm not an expert in having mindfulness lead to greater performances. I'm in that inquiry. I'm in no position to say go down the Buddhism route like at all. It's just something I did, and I've found benefit in it, and it's made me I think a better practitioner, more approachable, and more accepting. Mm-hmm. And all that information is there if people want to choose to develop themselves in something that's not, mainstream, so to speak. But it's brought me benefits personally, professionally, relationships. It's being a more mindful operator serves everyone, not just you.
Absolutely. No, I love it, mate. Thank you for sharing. From an industry perspective, is there anything in your work life that makes you angry or pet peeves that you'd like to change?
Yeah, look, I might be seen as like a mindfulness person, but I'm not immune to the the three fundamental causes of human upset, which would be like undelivered communication or withheld communication or thwarted intentions, like I want to get stuff done quickly, and or misaligned or unmet expectations. Those three things upset anyone, and I'm able to catch it with mindfulness. But you know, where I work, we got the AFC's got a lot of employees, a lot of initiatives, a lot of NSOs rely on us. There's a lot of stakeholders, and so navigating it, I'd like to go fast, but I got to recognise that it's a process and take time. So that's a bit, that's the ability to recognise my intention is speed, and and that's not what I'm going to get. It's able to that's probably I'll go there.
Yeah, constant challenge. And then, what about favourite way to spend a day off?
Yeah, the day off. I love golf, man. Like everyone around here knows I'm a golf nut. It offers me so many. I can be mindful golf. I can be performance golf. I can be recreational golf. I can be social golf. Like I get a lot from my 4 hours on a Saturday or a Sunday. For that, I'm also a bit hedonistic. I love a good like high quality meal and the conversations around high quality food. So, like I'm going to a decent restaurant tomorrow night with a couple of people, and really looking forward to that. Or actually, I just enjoy surrendering and indulging in my home with my fiance. We love a good Netflix series. We're watching. Oh goodness, it's on Apple TV. What's it called? The Coach started in America in football.
Oh, I've got off
I'm watching
Netflix.
it right now.
I'm on Stand at the moment.
Yeah, it's
Netflix
on Apple TV.
Oh,
It'll come
Apple
in.
TV.
Yeah. But we just watched all the sports stuff on Netflix. That was good stuff, like Drive to Survive, the golf one. They're all on there. They're excellent.
Yep. And obviously of this recording, late August 2023, what are you most excited about for the rest of the year, mate?
Yeah, it's a short time frame, but it's. I'm actually going to Melbourne in 2 weeks with my brother and my old man. We're getting around the AFL finals.
Oh, huge!
A lot of which games we're going to play. That weekend, the male artistic gymnasts that I'm working with are going over to Europe. Their first Olympic qualifier is then. I'm really looking forward to seeing how our three boys go there. I'm going to India to work with the ASCA in October. I've got a week of level 1 delivery in India. I'm really looking forward to the challenge, and I'm going to be pretty close to Nepal, so maybe get an extra week
trip.
in there. And the NBL. The NBL this year is really exciting. It's my 4th year of coaching the Centre of Excellence, and we've got some excellent athletes seeping into the NBL now. We've got Taran Armstrong at Cairns Taipans, Alex Tui at Sydney Kings, Lockie Olbrich at Illawarra, Josh Bannon at Brisbane Bullets, and David Okwira and Ben Henschel over at Perth Wildcats. So to just see the talent, I know who they are as characters, and I just can't wait to see that the NBL is starting to. It just has way more relevance for me now that there's kids that I've worked with over the last 4 years starting to get in and ruffle some feathers. I'm really excited for that.
Yeah, plenty happening. That's plenty to be excited about. Love that. That's awesome, mate. Thank you for sharing, and thank you for coming on as well and giving us a unique insight into I guess some Eastern philosophies and how it can transfer not only to help making life better, but also helping with performance, both from coach's perspective and athlete. It's not something we've discussed on the podcast before, but no doubt there's going to be, I've got 2 pages of notes. I found it hugely beneficial, and no doubt the listeners did too. So I really appreciate you coming on, JT. For anyone that's got any follow-up questions, mate, on the topic or just to connect in general, where's the best place to find you, mate?
Yeah, I got a an Instagram and a Twitter if people want to shoot me anything on there. I'll respond in my time, like not straight away probably, but it's my last name, Tatham, but you change the first A to I, so it's Tatham189. That's my handle for Instagram and Twitter. If
Easy.
anyone wants to DM me on there, I'm more than happy to have a chat. I'd love to hear from athletes and coaches that are maybe dipping their toe in this area and want some validation or advice, or just chew the fat about it, because it's fascinating to me, and it'll be a lifelong pursuit of mastering this, so everyone benefits.
Absolutely, mate. I appreciate it, and yeah, thank you. I guess on behalf of listeners, well, I make sure to add those links in the show notes. So if you are listening to the recording and you're driving, don't stress. Whenever you park the car, you'll be able to find it easily there. Thank you for everyone that's tuned in live as well. Our next live chat is with David Boyle, which will be 3 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time, the 7th of September. So thanks again, JT, and thanks for everyone tuning in. I'll see you on the next show.